If I told you that a rural gas station attendant who basically just chopped firewood for his hobby drastically outperformed a Harvard-educated executive in the exact same field, you'd probably think I was making it up.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like a script for a movie or, I don't know, some reality show competition.
Right. But in the psychology of wealth, that is exactly what happens. We're doing a deep dive today into a stack of sources that completely dismantles the idea of financial success as this, hard science or a strict math problem.
Yeah, the main thesis we're exploring is that building wealth is entirely a soft skill. It's a space where your behavior matters infinitely more than your raw intelligence.
And to really grasp how wild that thesis is, we just need to look at the contrast between two men from the source material. First, you have Ronald Reed.
Right, the gas station attendant.
Exactly. He was a gas station attendant, and later he worked as a janitor at JCPenney. He lived this incredibly quiet, frugal life and passed away at age 92.
And when he died, he completely shocked everyone by leaving behind an $8 million fortune.
8 million. And I mean, there was no secret inheritance there, right?
None. No lottery win, no hidden trust fund. He literally just saved what little he could, put it in blue chip stocks, and waited decades.
Just waited. But then, on the flip side, we have the polar opposite, Richard Fuscone.
Talk about a guy who had every conceivable advantage.
Exactly. He was a Harvard-educated executive at Merrill Lynch. He had an MBA. He was featured on all those prominent 40 under 40 lists.
He was so incredibly successful in the traditional sense that he actually retired in his 40s.
But then, in the mid-2000s, he borrowed heavily to expand this massive 18,000 square foot mansion in Greenwich. We're talking 2 pools, 2 elevators, 11 bathrooms.
Which was fine until the 2008 financial crisis hit.
Right, and his extreme leverage just turned his finances to dust. He faced bankruptcy, foreclosure, and was left with almost nothing.
The contrast is just staggering, and it highlights a really fundamental truth about money. I mean, think about it. In almost no other highly technical field could a story like this even exist.
Yeah, you would never hear a story about a humble janitor performing a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon.
Exactly. Or, a gas station attendant accidentally out-engineering the world's top nuclear physicist.
Yeah,
It simply does not happen.
it's impossible. But in finance, the landscape is dictated by human psychology, not physics.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is behavior so incredibly hard to master when it comes to money? I mean, if the math is readily available to everyone, what is breaking down in our decision-making process?
Well, the breakdown happens because everyone's financial worldview is entirely subjective. We all walk around thinking we know exactly how the global economy works, but we're all wearing completely different lenses.
Yeah, the source material points out this brilliant statistic to frame this. It says a person's individual lived experiences make up maybe 0.0000001% of what has actually happened in the world.
Right, a tiny microscopic fraction.
But those same tiny isolated experiences make up 80% of how they think the world works.
Which means two highly intelligent people can look at the exact same investment and come to entirely different, entirely rational conclusions, just based on when and where they were born.
Which is wild.
Take John F. Kennedy as a prime example. During the 1960 presidential election, he was asked what he remembered about the Great Depression.
And he admitted he had basically no personal experience of it, right?
Exactly. His family possessed one of the great fortunes of the world. So they actually had bigger houses and more servants during the 1930s. He only learned about the widespread economic devastation by reading books at Harvard.
Wow. Contrast his internal wiring with someone who was, permanently emotionally scarred by watching their parents lose their home and their dignity in 1931.
Right. Those two people are never going to evaluate stock market risk the same way.
Never.
The person who lived through the trauma isn't acting irrationally when they hoard cash. They're acting on a survival instinct that Kennedy fundamentally lacked.
That concept completely changes how you judge other people's decisions. Like, there's an analogy in the text regarding lottery tickets that really shifted my perspective on this.
Oh, the lotto ticket math. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so the lowest income households spend roughly $412 a year on lotto tickets. Now, mathematically, that is a terrible return on investment.
Especially when you realize a huge percentage of those same folks couldn't easily cover a $400 emergency.
Right. If you look at it on a spreadsheet, it's a catastrophic error. But if you step into their shoes, the logic changes entirely.
Because when you are living paycheck to paycheck, The things wealthier people treat as a given just feel systemically locked away.
Exactly. Like a safe neighborhood, college tuition, a simple vacation. Buying that ticket is really the only time they get to hold a tangible dream of escaping the grind.
They aren't buying a financial asset. They are purchasing a sliver of hope.
Which makes total sense within their unique mental model.
And that mental model is heavily shaped by two forces that dictate our lives far more than we like to admit: the sibling forces of luck and risk.
We really love to attribute success to pure hard work, don't we?
Oh, constantly.
Yeah.
But we completely ignore the baseline probabilities. Like, the sources bring up Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Gates is undeniably brilliant and hardworking.
Nobody's denying that.
Right. But he also experienced a 1 in a million stroke of luck. In 1968, he happened to attend Lakeside School, which was literally one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer.
Out of roughly 303 million high school-age kids globally at the time, maybe 300 had that kind of access.
The compounding advantage of getting those 10,000 hours of programming in before anyone else even knew what a computer was, it's astronomical.
But the narrative usually stops there. We would just say he was a genius.
Exactly. But the source material intentionally juxtaposes Gates with his best friend, Kent Evans.
Oh, this story's so tragic.
It really is. By all accounts, Kent was just as skilled, just as driven, and just as smart as Gates. They schemed about being CEOs together. Kent easily could have been a founding partner of Microsoft.
But Ken experienced 1 in a million risk. He died in a mountaineering accident before graduation.
Right. Luck and risk are the exact same force. They're just the reality that outcomes are dictated by events completely outside of our control. They just work in opposite directions.
We celebrate the luck, but we tend to completely ignore the invisible graveyard of risk. I have to push back a little on how society views this, though, because we don't just celebrate luck. We actively idolize the scrappy visionary who, bends the rules to make their own luck.
Oh, definitely.
Look at the Cornelius Vanderbilt example from our sources. He was building his massive railroad empire, and his advisor explicitly told him that his transactions were breaking the law.
And his response is legendary.
Right. Vanderbilt actually said, "My God, John, you don't suppose you can run a railroad in accordance with the statutes of the state of New York, do you?" And we print that quote in business books as a sign of genius. But the line between a scrappy visionary who skirts the law and builds an empire and a reckless criminal whose company collapses into a massive scandal is razor thin. It is almost entirely dependent on whether or not they got caught.
What's fascinating here is that you're hitting on the exact danger of studying extreme success. When judging an outcome, nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems.
That's a great point.
If Vanderbilt's gambles fail, he's a cautionary tale taught in ethics classes. Because he succeeded, he's a titan of industry. Because it's nearly impossible to untangle genuine skill from the invisible forces of luck and risk, we just can't build our financial philosophies around extreme outlier.
We have to look at broad, repeatable patterns of behavior instead.
Exactly.
Because if the line between a visionary and a cautionary tale is heavily influenced by luck, it creates this massive psychological trap. If you don't fully understand how much of your success is outside your control, you never know when to stop pushing.
The goalpost just keeps moving.
Right, which leads to the destruction of what you've already built. We see this with two incredibly dark stories in our sources: Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff.
Those are two textbook examples of individuals who had absolutely everything, yet risked it all for something they didn't even need.
Right. Let's talk about Gupta first.
So Gupta was the CEO of McKinsey. He was worth $100 million.
$100 million.
The math on that wealth is staggering. A mere 5% return on $100 million generates about $600 an hour, 24 hours a day, forever.
He had achieved total financial independence. He won the game.
But social comparison creates this invisible, unwinnable hierarchy. He was rubbing elbows with billionaires, and suddenly his $100 million felt inadequate.
Which is insane to think about.
It is. So he used his position on the Goldman Sachs board to pass insider tips about Warren Buffett, generated around $17 million in illegal profits, and ended up in prison.
And Madoff is the exact same mechanism, just a different scale.
Sure.
Before the infamous Ponzi scheme, Madoff ran a highly profitable, totally legitimate market-making business. He was legally pulling in $25 to $50 million a year.
Which is astronomical wealth.
But the desire for more drove him to orchestrate the largest financial fraud in history. The psychological insight here is that the ceiling of social comparison is just impossible to hit.
Yeah, a rookie athlete making $500,000 feels broke next to a superstar making $30 million.
And the superstar feels broke next to a hedge fund manager making 300 million. The only way to win the game of keeping up is to actively refuse to play it.
And refusing to play requires understanding when you have enough.
Hmm.
And enough gets completely derailed by how modern society signals status.
Right.
The author of our source material calls this the man in the car paradox.
Oh, I love this concept.
Yeah, so while working as a valet in Los Angeles, he was constantly surrounded by Ferraris and Porsches. And he realized this profound truth about human nature. When a Ferrari rolls up, nobody looks at the driver and thinks, wow, that guy is so cool.
No, they look at the car and imagine themselves driving it.
Exactly. People purchase luxury items to buy respect and admiration from others. But the tragic irony is that the physical items just become shiny benchmarks for other people's fantasies.
The driver thinks they're buying status, but they are actually just buying a mirror for everyone else's ego.
That illusion captures the exact difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Okay, break that down for us.
Being rich is highly visible. It's current income. The author mentions a guy named Roger who drove a Porsche. Roger was rich enough to secure the hefty car loan, which looked great right up until the Porsche got repossessed, and he had to show up in an old Honda.
Ouch.
Yeah. Wealth, on the other hand, is invisible. Wealth is the income you haven't spent. It's the hidden options, the cars you didn't buy, the first-class upgrades you declined. Wealth is financial assets that haven't been converted into visible stuff.
It's exactly like a rigorous exercise routine. If you spend an hour sweating at the gym, you burn a bunch of calories. That gives you the capacity to eat more. That is like being rich.
All right, you have the capacity.
But human nature kicks in. People overestimate the calories burned, go out and eat a massive treat meal, completely undoing the physical work.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
Oh, we all have. But building wealth requires the psychological self-control to turn down the treat meal. You are intentionally preserving the unseen gap between what you have and what you consume.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If wealth is the invisible stuff we don't see, how do we systematically build it over time? The answer isn't about finding massive lightning strike returns.
No, it rarely is.
It's about the subtle, almost imperceptible power of compounding. And to explain this, the sources look backward to the astronomical theories of the Ice Age.
Yeah, the work of Milutin Milankovitch and Vladimir Kupin completely shifted how we view monumental change. For a long time, the prevailing scientific thought was that the ice ages were triggered by extreme ravenous winters, massive catastrophic events.
Like huge global freezes.
Exactly. But the reality is far more subtle. The ice ages were actually caused by moderately cool summers.
A summer that is just barely cool enough that a tiny thin layer of winter snow survives and doesn't melt.
Right. And that leftover ice makes it slightly easier for snow to accumulate the following winter.
Because it reflects more sunlight.
Exactly. That larger snowpack reflects more sunlight, which cools the Earth a fraction of a degree more, preserving even more ice the next year. It compounds year after year until a tiny layer of frost turns into a global sheet of ice miles thick.
The philosophical insight here is just brilliant. You don't need tremendous world-shattering force to create tremendous results. You just need a relentless baseline that never resets to zero.
And that translates perfectly to Warren Buffett.
Oh, the math on Buffett is mind-blowing.
It really is. At the time our source was written, Buffett's net worth was $84.5 billion.
Okay.
The instinctive thought is that he must possess an unparalleled ability to pick stocks. But the underlying math tells a totally different story. Of that $84.5 billion, $81.5 billion came after his 65th birthday.
That's just wild.
His true secret isn't just his investing acumen. It is the uninterrupted duration of his compounding. He started investing when he was 10 years old.
Which means if he had started at age 30 and retired at 60 like a normal person, even with his exact same rate of return, we would have never even heard of him.
We can prove that by looking at Jim Simons, the legendary head of Renaissance Technologies.
Right.
Simons compounded money at an unbelievable 66% annually. Buffett's average is only around 22%.
So Simons is mathematically a far superior investor by percentage.
Far superior. But he has significantly less total wealth than Buffett because Simons didn't find his investing stride until he was 50 years old. He had less than half the time to let the snowpack accumulate.
I have to imagine, though, that the hardest part isn't starting early. It's not interrupting the compounding. How do you stay in the game for 75 years without wiping out when markets crash, bubbles burst, and life just throws curveballs?
Well, that requires mastering two completely opposing skill sets. Getting wealthy requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting capital on the line.
Right, you have to get in the game.
But staying wealthy requires the exact opposite. It requires profound frugality and a really healthy dose of paranoia.
The sources highlight this tragic parallel between Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky.
Yeah, this is a perfect example.
In the devastating 1929 stock market crash, Livermore took a massive short position and made the equivalent of $3 billion in a single week. He conquered the market.
Incredible.
But at the exact same time, Jomansky, who was a millionaire real estate developer, lost his entire fortune in the crash and just disappeared.
And you have to imagine Livermore must have felt invincible.
He did, and that invincibility was his downfall. Fast forward 4 years to 1933. The mindset that made Livermore rich taking massive, highly leveraged bets prevented him from staying wealthy.
He couldn't pivot to survival mode.
No, he kept making riskier bets, completely lost his $3 billion fortune, and ultimately took his own life. Survival requires the humility to leave room for error.
And if you can cultivate that paranoia and survive your own mistakes, you allow the long tails to do the heavy lifting.
Explain long tails for us.
The source material shows how long tails, these rare outlier events, drive almost the entire outcome of success. Take Walt Disney. His first studio went bankrupt. His team produced 400 cartoons that were complete financial failures.
400.
400. But then they poured everything into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it was a massive, unprecedented hit. It paid off all their debts, bought their state-of-the-art Burbank studio, and transformed the company into an empire.
So 83 minutes of film completely wiped out the financial drag of 400 failures.
Exactly. The art dealer, Heinz Berggruen, utilized the exact same strategy. He amassed a billion-dollar collection of Picassos and Matisses.
But he didn't have a crystal ball to know which pieces would become masterpieces, did he?
No, he just acted like an index fund. He bought massive quantities of art and simply waited. 99% of his collection might have been totally unremarkable, but he survived long enough for the 1% of masterpieces to emerge and define his entire portfolio's return.
To survive long enough to let those rare masterpieces emerge, you need a reliable engine. That engine is your savings rate. And here is the profound pivot in the source material. To get a high savings rate, your mindset actually needs to be reasonable, rather than perfectly rational.
Yeah, think about the 1970s oil crisis. We didn't solve that massive energy shock by magically discovering huge new oil reserves.
Right.
We solved it by doubling the mile-per-gallon efficiency of our vehicles. Savings is the financial equivalent of energy efficiency. You cannot control the supply of market returns, but you have absolute control over the demand of your lifestyle.
Past a certain basic income level required for survival and comfort, your savings rate is simply the gap between your ego and your income.
That's exactly it.
It is the money you intentionally do not spend trying to signal your wealth to others.
This raises an important question. Should we aim to be cold, calculating spreadsheet robots with our money to perfectly optimize that efficiency?
The sources offer a really bizarre medical story that perfectly illustrates why the answer is no.
Oh, the syphilis treatment.
Yes. Julius Wagner Jauregg was a psychiatrist in the early 1900s who discovered a successful treatment for syphilis, which was a fatal diagnosis at the time. His treatment method, he deliberately injected his patients with a weak strain of malaria.
Intentionally giving a patient malaria sounds like a violation of every medical oath in existence.
It sounds medieval, but he recognized a fundamental biological mechanism. Severe raging fevers fought off the syphilis infection.
Okay, so scientifically, mathematically, rationally, a fever is your body's immune system doing its job.
Right, it is a highly effective good thing. But practically, humans universally try to stop fevers the moment they start because they are physically miserable.
Yeah, nobody wants to suffer through a fever.
It might be mathematically rational to let a fever rage, but it is not reasonable to ask a human being to endure that level of suffering without intervening.
And that exact tension between math and human endurance applies to investing. Look at Harry Markowitz. He won a Nobel Prize for creating the mathematically optimal way to balance an investment portfolio.
He literally found the formula for the perfect financial fever.
He did. But when asked how he invested his own retirement money, he admitted he didn't use his Nobel-winning math. He simply split his money 50-50 between stocks and bonds.
Wow. Why?
Because his goal wasn't to maximize his spreadsheet. His goal was to minimize his future regret. He didn't want the emotional agony of missing out during a boom, nor did he want the terror of getting wiped out during a bust.
He intentionally chose to be reasonable instead of rational.
Exactly.
A mathematically perfect strategy with massive leverage might generate higher returns on paper, but if the volatility causes you to panic and sell everything the minute the market drops 30%, the real-world return of that perfect strategy is deeply negative.
Right. If holding a bit too much cash or owning your home outright instead of investing the equity helps you sleep at night and keeps you in the game for decades, then being reasonable absolutely beats being strictly rational.
And all of this, compounding, saving, surviving, it builds toward one ultimate goal. It is the highest dividend that money pays.
Freedom.
The ability to wake up every single morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ultimate value of wealth isn't the ability to purchase luxury items. It's the ability to control your own time.
And controlling our time is more crucial and, frankly, harder to achieve than ever before.
Yeah.
The nature of work has fundamentally changed. The author points out that in the 1950s, most people worked with their hands in factories or trades. When they clocked out and went home, work was physically over. The tools stayed at the factory.
But today, most of our jobs resemble the work of John D. Rockefeller. He spent most of his day sitting in silence, just thinking. His work was decision-making, synthesizing information, strategizing. Because we are now primarily knowledge workers, our tools are in our heads, and we are connected to them 24/7. The mental machinery never actually shuts off.
Having a financial buffer is the only way to manually pull the plug on that machinery. The sources share this great story about Derek Sivers, who saved up a mere $12,000 at age 22, quit his day job, and became a full-time musician.
And he later sold a company for millions of dollars, right?
He did, but he noted that the millions didn't change his life nearly as much as that initial $12,000 did. That small cash buffer bought his autonomy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire psychology of wealth demands a shift in how we view the future. There is a dangerous trap we all fall into, which is treating historians as prophets.
Well, for sure.
We mistakenly believe that studying the past gives us a perfectly accurate schematic for the future. But history is literally the study of surprises. The things that have never happened before happen all the time.
When you look back at the 19th and 20th centuries, roughly 15 billion people were born. But the vast majority of global economic direction was driven by maybe 7 specific individuals, people like Hitler, Stalin, Edison, Gates.
Yeah.
Combine that with a handful of completely unprecedented events like the Great Depression or 9/11, and you realize the modern world is built on outlier anomalies.
You cannot use a spreadsheet of past data to perfectly predict a future that is guaranteed to be filled with completely novel surprises.
So what does this all mean?
It means we must abandon the idea of rigid, highly optimized financial plans that rely on the world behaving exactly as it did in the past. You must plan on the plan not going according to plan.
Survival requires building a massive margin of safety into your expectations.
Absolutely.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We are living in a hyper-connected world where a billion people have access to the exact same information, the exact same spreadsheets, and the exact same market data at the exact same time.